Donald Trump has recalled the U.S. ambassador who testified in the impeachment inquiry against him, becoming the second prominent witness to be fired in the aftermath of the president's acquittal on charges of abuse of power and obstruction. I was advised today that the president intends to recall me effective immediately as United States ambassador to the European Union, Gordon Sondland said in a statement released on Friday evening. The hotelier from Oregon became a diplomat after donating $1 million to Mr. Trump's inauguration committee. During his explosive testimony at the impeachment inquiry, Mr. Sondland contradicted claims from Mr. Trump and his top aides that there was no quid pro quo when the White House withheld aid from Ukraine as a way to pressure Kiev to launch an investigation into former U.S. Vice President Joe Biden. His recall came within hours of the dismissal of Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, the U.S. Army officer who told impeachment investigators that Donald Trump made inappropriate demands of his Ukrainian counterpart. Lt. Col. Vindman, a Ukraine expert, was sacked from his post at the National Security Council and escorted out of the White House, his lawyer said. Mr. Vindman earned Mr. Trump's ire after testifying about the president's phone call with Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky, where Mr. Trump attempted to coerce the Ukrainian leader into opening an investigation into his Democratic rivals. Similarly, Mr. Sondland had testified that there was a scheme to force the Ukrainians to announce politically beneficial investigations that was known to top U.S. officials including Mike Pence, the Vice President, Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, and Mick Mulvaney, the acting White House Chief of Staff. To secure a phone call with Mr. Trump and an Oval Office meeting for Volodymyr Zelensky, their new president, the Ukrainians were told they would have to launch the probe sought by the U.S. president, Mr. Sondland testified. On Friday, Lt. Col. Vindman, who was listening in on the call, was asked to leave for telling the truth, his lawyer David Pressman said in a statement. There is no question in the mind of any American why this man's job is over, why this country now has one less soldier serving it at the White House. Mr. Trump had earlier in the day told reporters he was not happy with him and retweeted messages calling for him to be dismissed. John Oliot, spokesman for the National Security Council, declined to comment, saying the NSC would not discuss personnel matters. Lt. Col. Vindman's twin brother, the NSC lawyer and fellow Army Lieutenant Colonel Yevgeny Vindman, was also removed from his post and escorted from the White House with no explanation, Mr. Pressman said. Yevgeny Vindman was not involved in the impeachment proceedings. The Vindman's removal comes 2 days after Mr. Trump was acquitted of 2 impeachment charges by the U.S. Senate. Both former NSC staffers remain serving Army officers. Alexander Vindman, who earned a Purple Heart after he was wounded by a roadside bomb serving in Iraq, had testified to the House Intelligence Committee that Mr. Trump's call was improper because it sought Kiev's investigation of former U.S. Vice President Joe Biden's son Hunter. He was one of the first officials with first-hand knowledge of a July 25 phone call between the two leaders to testify in public. During the call, Mr. Trump asked Mr. Zelensky to look into debunked claims that Ukraine interfered in the 2016 U.S. election and find dirt on the Bidens. Joe Biden was a frontrunner for the 2020 Democratic presidential nomination at the time. A whistleblower complaint about Mr. Trump's conduct on the call triggered the impeachment proceedings, which ultimately led to the president's acquittal on 2 charges. On Friday, Mr. Pressman said, "The truth has cost Lt. Col. Alexander Vindman his job, his career, and his privacy. He did what any member of our military is charged with doing every day. He followed orders, he obeyed his oath, and he served his country, even when doing so was fraught with danger and personal peril," added Mr. Pressman of Boys Schiller Flexner. And for that, the most powerful man in the world, toyed by the silent, the pliable, and the complicit, has decided to exact revenge. Senator Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader, issued a statement praising Lt. Col. Vindman for testifying about Mr. Trump's actions. "As usual, the White House runs away from the truth," Mr. Schumer said. "This action is not a sign of strength. It only shows President Trump's weakness." During his House testimony, Lt. Col. Vindman also described how Mr. Sondland brought 2 Ukrainian officials to a July 10 meeting with John Bolton, which the then National Security Advisor cut short after Mr. Sondland pressed the Ukrainians on the Biden investigation. On Friday, the U.S. President's son Donald Trump Jr. appeared to confirm the firings were in revenge for the testimony during the House impeachment trial. "Allow me a moment to thank, and this may be a bit of a surprise, Adam Schiff. Were it not for his crack investigation skills, a real Donald Trump might have had a tougher time unearthing who all needed to be fired. Thanks, Adam," he tweeted. In response, Mr. Schiff, chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, said on Twitter, "President Trump is exacting his retribution, removing those who complied with subpoenas, came forward and testified about his misconduct. These are the actions of a man who believes he is above the law, precisely the kind of conduct congressional Republicans enabled."